Thank you.
Pretty soon you're going to be starting.
All right, it is
Shakespeare or something.
2:01 on
There we go.
September 4th, 2019. This is our workshop. Call this meeting to order and ask if there are any amendments to the agenda. Hearing none, may I have a motion, please?
I move that we approve the agenda as written.
Second, Mr. Chair.
Further discussion? Roll, please.
Commissioner Gold,
Aye.
Vice Chair Boyce,
Yes?
Chair Pash.
Aye.
Motion carried unanimously.
It's nice to have that vim and vigor back in that motion carrying.
I really missed him one
Last
day.
week was tough, I'll tell you. All right, we're moving to number 3, projects. Harbor Sanitary District. Now, he's going to be late. Do you want to start with that first, or do you want to do Mr. Duquesne's presentation?
I'd have to ask, can Harbor Sanitary District, do you have time to wait around for a while, or would you prefer we just proceed right now? You can wait? Okay.
Mr. Duquesne?
And he promised me it'd be short, sweet, and to the point. Is that correct?
I didn't promise.
You don't have to be short.
I'm careful about those promises.
You spent a lot of time to get here today, right? Thank you.
Good afternoon, commissioners, staff, John Jesuit. And John, can you pull up the PowerPoint, please? So with me today, I have Ben Cannon, who is our Public Health Administrator, and I also have Ed Conyers, who's the Curry Community Health Board Chair. And at different times, they'll probably be coming up to help me with this presentation. Yes, sir. Thank you. So we were here on May 22nd, 2019. The first 3 pages of this are the exact same as they were back on May 22nd, 2019. So just a quick wrap on this is it's a background on when the transfer agreement occurred between Curry County and CCH, moving those public health and behavioral health programs into our nonprofit. Page 2 is a continuation of that background, talking about some of the issues we encountered. And page 3 is really the most important one. These were the options we were going to get back to on the county. Our board voted on option 1, and they unanimously voted no to return the entire CCH to Curry County. Option number 2, we've talked to the county about providing us with some funds. To date, we've had no funds received from the county. And option number 3 was to surrender the public health programs to Curry County no later than December 31, 2019. That's what we're stating today. At the 5/22/19 meeting, we listed that as June 30th, 2020. The reason we're asking for an earlier turnover date, we will get into that next. First and foremost, since the new agreement between the county and CCH started on January 1, 2018, these are all the changes that happened at the state that impact subcontractors, which would be us. 17 changes since 2018. And if you take a look at the bulk of those changes, you're going to see that triennial review tool is revised many times throughout that process. I'll go a little fast, and then if we need to back up, I will back up.
So one quick question on that.
Yes, sir.
So we wouldn't, as a county, we wouldn't face that. It's because you're a nonprofit, you do.
Well, we're going to talk about, we don't have the authority to do anything. We can only provide services, and we really need to talk about that because our agreement is not compliant with current revised statutes or Oregon administrative rules.
Okay.
It is completely out of line in some very particular areas, which I will get to. I just wanted to show you the magnitude of the changes that are coming at us. This is not a CCH thing. This is not a Curry County thing. This is definitely a state of Oregon
Statewide.
issue. Statewide. There's been some other counties who've actually surrendered their programs back to the state. So more specifically now, we'll dive in and tackle some of this stuff. So we've had substantial changes since 2/1/13, including that OHA no longer provides 3-party contracts. The FAA, which is the funding agreement between the state and Curry County, is signed directly by the county. It is likely the triennial review that they have not fully completed yet. Okay, we'll pass on the software update. It is likely the triennial review will have a host of corrective actions that relate to subcontracting, monitoring, public health administrator compliance, and I have that OAR attached here, which will make your council's job a lot easier, and LPHA requirements, and we also have that OAR attached as well. In contrast, the Behavioral Health Services Agreement, which is a separate agreement, has only had one significant change in that same period of time, only one, and we contract directly with the state, so the county's not involved in that process at all. In this OAR 333-014-0520, here they're talking about a public health administrator, and essentially the requirement is each county needs to have their own full-time public health administrator. If you're going to request a variance, which the county has not done yet, to enter into some sort of an agreement with the state to say, well, we're only going to have a 0.5 public health administrator, then the county would have to apply for that variance and send that letter in. But to date, that hasn't been done, so that's going to show up as a problem on the triennial review. The next ones I'll hit, and then I want to get Ben up here to talk about some of these. So, again, we're following up on the public health administrator, which is the 314-520, and then we have the 550, which are the requirements, the items that a county is required to do that is statutorily required. And I'm not going to go through that whole list of duties. We have a separate page that actually lines it out a little easier, but we put the OAR in so that when you guys go through this, you actually can look at what the statutory authorities are. And then finally, the last one is when you contract with local public health services and activities, what you can do. In our agreement, there's one line that basically says the county is giving CCH all this stuff to do. The new, and I don't know how new they are, we'll have to go back if you had the time to go back and track them, but the new rules require that you specifically identify what everybody's doing. So if we were going to do WIC services, which is women, infants, and children, CCH is going to do this, the county is going to do this, and we're going to monitor you with these measures. That's what your contract has to say. We don't have that language in our contract. We have language that says you're going to do everything. That's not going to work. That's going to come back on the triennial review as a bad area. So let's get Ben up here to talk about that because he does most of this stuff.
Ben Cannon, Public Health Administrator. There we go. So to that note on the triennial review, so this process is when every 3 years the state comes and reviews the public health programming that each county engages in. We just engaged in this starting in June, and we have not officially wrapped that process up because we do have some significant findings when it comes to subcontractor monitoring, administrative oversight by county, and finance oversight as well. So with that being said, what are those areas that the county, we consider core public health or things that is required that the county be engaging in? So these are the programs here: communicable disease, so any kind of work that we do around investigating reportable diseases in our county. Public health emergency preparedness, preparing people for natural disasters, health disasters and whatnot. Environmental health, all of our inspections, food, pool, lodging, safe drinking water as well. Vital statistics, which currently is housed at the county. Women, infants, and children, as Ken mentioned before. The immunization school exclusion program. This program looks at and ensures that every school child, every school-age child attending a public school is up to date on their immunizations. And if they don't meet those requirements, then they're excluded from school until they do meet those requirements. Again, kind of a regulatory program that's operated. Public health modernization, which is a statewide and regional approach to ensure a standard level of practice of public health across the state, and moving public health towards more of that population-based health instead of a one-to-one clinical health approach. The tobacco prevention education program, reproductive health community participation and assurance. This is ensuring that people have access to good care. and then the alcohol and drug prevention education program. So these we really consider the core public health programs and things that the local public health authority needs to be engaging with.
All right,
Thank you.
thanks, man.
Oh, next one.
Wait, he's gonna go to another one, wait.
And these are programs that we kind of consider more clinical or more of that one-to-one service level. And these are things that counties can, in fact, subcontract or have another provider work on. And that's the public health practice in providing immunizations, the actual act of giving the immunization. The school-based health center, Title V programs, and these are maternal child health, so 0 to 5-year-old clinical care. And that dovetails with perinatal and maternal health, cocoon and babies first. And these are programming that are really looking at providing the best care, case management for kids 0 to 5 to ensure that they're getting the health care needs met.
Commissioner Boyce had a question?
Oh, just back on the tobacco prevention programs, and I made this point at the state AOC, similar kind of presentation, but it was from the state, not the county. They never include marijuana use as a prevention. It's just tobacco. And
Yeah.
so I just, for what it's worth, Mr. Chair, I think that sends a wrong message to our kids. But I just try and push to include those two as high risk for addiction. Thank you.
And certainly back here on the, it's not included in that, and I think, I can't speak for the state, but potentially that might be folded in the future. But it really gets covered
They
to
do
some
leave it
degree
out,
on
though,
the alcohol and
consistently.
drug program.
Yeah. Okay, good.
So,
But they don't ever specifically mention it. They leave it out. And
No,
so,
no, I hear what you're saying.
thank you.
Mhm. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben.
So we would like to work with Curry County on mutually returning the public health program. We don't like giving up on the program, but we're really concerned about the sustainability of public health. The writing's on the wall. The state may say, it's our intent to allow the counties to subcontract, but when you look at these exhaustive changes, that's not really the intent. We want to work with the county to the best of our ability. We don't want to dump public health. We want public health to be sustainable. We've worked hard all these years to bring these services up. Yes, Commissioner Gold.
So if the county were to take over these programs you suggested, and we contract them out, those agencies that we contract to are going to be in the same position as you are. Is that correct?
No.
No?
There are regulatory authority issues and programs that the county can run, and we'll go back up here. These are the things. Let me give you a good example. Environmental health, right? We all know what environmental health does. They go out and do the food, pool, and lodging inspections, right? Our guy goes in. We do have two guys, sorry. They go in, they do the inspection, and if something's wrong, they have to come back to the county and tell somebody something's wrong so the code enforcement officer can go out. If you have your EH inspectors and they're part of the county circle, you can deputize them and they can cite on the spot. There's not all this running around. I mean, we really need to make that VRBO connection happen with the environmental health. Look at the funds that we're sitting on in environmental health. We can't use them, the county can, but there's a surplus of somewhere between $150,000 and $180,000 of environmental health fees that are sitting there. The state's pretty clear on how those fees can be used, but we can't use those. But the county could utilize those, and that's a good example of how that regulatory authority comes into play. If you take a look at vital statistics, we were no longer allowed to maintain that program. We had to give it back to the county because of the authority piece that was attached to it. Same thing with the immunization school exclusion program. Here we're telling kiddos who are not immunized they can't go to school, but we don't have the authority to do anything about that. We'd have to come back to the county and say, hey, can you go enforce this? This is really the substance of the change. There are things you can contract out to anybody, and we're saying, hey, it doesn't have to be all about us. If you want to contract with other providers, we're in full support. Immunizations could be contracted out because that's not an authority issue. That's a direct client service. School-based health center, you could contract that out because that's a direct client service. It's not an authority piece. Same thing with all the Title V programs. They don't require authority. By doing this, you don't have to set up your own clinic. You don't have to make your own exam room. You don't have to hire your own nurse practitioner or your own nurse because you're going to rely on other people to do that. That's the value in it.
So I'm
Mr.
kind of
Gold?
looking at this whole thing, and basically what you're saying is we're streamlining the process by giving some of this back to the county, and I'm also looking at maybe our code enforcement officer being able to go in and enforce some of these things. I don't know. So,
Well, actually, I think you'd get some assistance to your code enforcement by having the two inspectors who are doing the environmental health inspectors back up the code enforcement officer for various things. And this is where we arrive today. This is what we believe. We don't really want to do this, but it's like, what can we do? We can't do anything. We don't have the authority to do anything. It's like the gloves are on and we're trying to work on a car. It's impossible for us to do this anymore. And that's why we're here having the conversation today.
so we can't deputize you? Just kidding.
I think I got enough to do right now. So I just wanted to share with you what, if, you know, I'm not expecting, this is a workshop. There's not going to be a decision made here today. Obviously, I want to come back at the end of the month to a regular business meeting, talk about that, but I also want to talk about how we want to help in this process. We want to ask all of our current CCH public health employees to apply for any equivalent jobs. These are great people. They do fantastic jobs. They're very well trained. We have a CCH employee that meets all the minimum qualifications to be a public health administrator. He's got a master's in public health. He's interested in joining the county and getting on the team, if that's the case. And we would suggest, if it's your pleasure to join us in this process, to get that public health administrator on right around the first part of October. You could use some of those environmental health funds that have been sitting there in helping process out this type of a transition. We'll provide all current work product that's not HIPAA sensitive so that there is no interruption in service or minimal interruption in service. We will complete all of our reporting on public health programs by January 31 to close out that quarter so that you have a faster way to process that. We'll discuss potential contracts with you to provide services that are client service-based. We will give you all the state purchased equipment. We'll give you all the FEP equipment. We'll provide general public health consulting services to Curry County for a period of not less than 90 days and up to 6 months at our cost. We're not going to try to make any money off of that. We'll provide program and financial reporting consulting services to Curry County for a period of not less than 90 days and up to 6 months, again at cost. And the two important things are the county is going to be able to access those fees, and then the county is also eligible for an OHA match. The OHA hasn't begun the matching program yet, but we're ineligible. I've had arguments with the state that we've put funds into public health, and they don't count that. They only count the funds that are provided through a county general fund, and the applicable Oregon administrative rule is listed up there. Mr. Conyers, did you have any feedback for the board? Okay. Questions from the board?
I have a few. So, Ken, how would we sustain a program like this and the employees?
So we've cut costs tremendously. When we first took over this contract, we were getting about $742,000 a year. Right now, it's down to $437,000 a year. The difference is, don't hire nurses and family nurse practitioners. Contract out direct client services. Now your cost is sustaining 8 to 9 employees, and they're all pretty much funded. What's not funded, you have access to the environmental health fees. We can't take that money. We can't touch that. I'm not saying you're going to break even. I'm not saying you're going to make money. I'm not saying you're going to lose money because I'm not your county accountant. I'm saying that you're in a much better position to be up than we are. We can't do all of this tied in the way we are without the authority pieces and without the access to the additional environmental health fees.
Can you back up 3 slides, please?
Yes, sir. This one?
One more. I just wanted to look at that a minute. I don't know if Commissioner Gold had anything, or Commissioner Boyce. Because all of those, to me, they look like they're pretty easy to contract out.
So you need to read the Oregon Administrative Rules.
And that's what I'm gonna.
Local public health authority can contract out services, but you cannot contract out authority.
Right, no, I understand that, but I'm saying this part of it.
Communicable diseases, if somebody gets TB, they may have to be sequestered. We don't have the authority to sequester them, and that, it just becomes another one of those linkages where it's almost impossible to do it without being a county entity.
And that's what I meant, as a county entity. I was just speaking to the board. As a county entity, we could push a lot of these out and just be the entity, like you said, that subcontracts are.
But then wouldn't we be in the same situation where they have to come back and get the authority from us to do whatever they need
They
to do?
would if you, and I will just share with you, I doubt that the state would support that contract. If you're going to contract with another provider, the county has to give the state a minimum of 75-day notice before you're going to enter into that contract. And the state's going to look at that contract and make sure that it's clear and specific and those things are outlined, and whether or not those duties can be pushed out to a subcontractor, and what the monitoring duties are going to be like, et cetera.
So how many employees do you think we would have to?
8.
8? Oh, you already had that question answered. Okay, so we've got 8 new employees.
He said that.
We've got 8 new people with PERS. We've got 8 new people with other benefits, health benefits. So we're talking some big bucks.
And no space for them.
Build it, they'll come? I don't know.
Council?
Oh, thanks. So it seemed like, Ken, right now we have 90%, I'm just using a number here, but 90% of our health services are being delivered by CCH under contract. And then we're doing, of this list, I think the vital statistics here, and then we're doing some enforcement. You talk about authority, and I think the statute uses the word governance. I think we can contract out everything but governance, and then the governance is the enforcement arm. And then the proposal seems to be we take back, you know, more than the 10%, if even that we're doing now, and do this much with 8 people. You all do some, and then we contract out the other tasks that don't need governance to someone who's not you. But why couldn't you guys do the other tasks that don't involve governance?
So I think at the county, we're going to open it up. There ought to be a process where other providers can get involved.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to
Sure.
step
Okay.
on people's toes. It's open access. I mean, any of us, providers, can do reproductive health and bill the state without going through a county contract. Any of us can do the immunization program without going through the county and contracting directly with the state. Those are viable options for us. Our problem is we can't do the authority pieces anymore, and we've been left in a boat without oars. I'm not blaming any of you. I'm just saying this is where we are today, and we can't do that anymore. I'm not good with not passing a triennial visit, not because of the things we did, but because maybe some things some other people didn't do. That's not good for public health. That's not long-term sustainability. We have an obligation to the people. That's why we've invested $1.1 million in public health in the last 3 years. We stand behind that. But we can't deliver anymore. The state has made it impossible.
So Ken, just to be clear, so when all of this was set up, when you broke away from the county in the first time, and you took all these programs on, at that time, there was no requirement that the county do the enforcement?
At the time that we separated, we were the local public health authority.
And that's
We
why
have-
it worked at that time, but now with the state changing that we have to do the enforcement, that's why we need to consider taking it back.
Well, remember, the changes have been constant.
Yep.
Since 2014.
Yeah.
That's 6 years.
Your council knows that. We
5
made
years.
like 18 amendments or something to the original transfer agreement. We couldn't follow it anymore, so we made the new agreement. And now the new agreement is not in line with the new rules and statutes. And what I'm suggesting to you is, look, these things really belong with the county because they involve authority at some level to operate those programs efficiently.
Again,
You don't have to go out and get-
enforcement, they require enforcement.
Again, I use the term
I know.
authority because when I talk to the people at the state, that's
Okay.
the terminology
Sorry.
they use. And
Thanks.
when I
All
read
right.
through the statutes and the OARs, governance is important, but LPHA with
Yeah.
that authority piece is really the big point
Okay.
here. We don't have the authority to do certain things. And that just slows things down. So that means that potentially we have a restaurant that was inspected, found to be not appropriate, and then we're going to wait a week or two before we get in there with a code enforcement officer and make that change. I don't call that good public health, right? If there's a problem in a restaurant, they ought to
Right.
be cited on the spot.
Or the ones who aren't paying their license
So that's
fees.
a whole other thing that I
Okay.
know you're very familiar with.
I don't want to repeat what these two gentlemen said. They've covered that in detail. I just want you to know that we as a board have debated this at several of our meetings. In our last meeting, I know Cord is one of our board members, and he went through all those possibilities that we had discussed prior when he wasn't able to attend one of the meetings. And we reviewed it all again, and unfortunately, we're unanimous in the fact that we just can't do it anymore for the reasons that he and Ben have discussed. And so I want you to know that we didn't take this lightly. We tried and tried to figure a way that we could continue to do it. But as Kenneth said, that these things have been removed out of our authority, and that's a big portion of them. That others, there was only on that other slide, what, 4 or 5 that you could still do. So I want you to know that, we didn't just say, forget about it. We tried.
You got to introduce yourself.
Oh, I'm sorry. Ed Conyers, I'm
You
the
introduce yourself.
board chair.
For Curry Community Health.
Frank Sinatra, the organization.
You're here.
So I am at your disposal, board, council, Julie, for questions during the course of the next couple of weeks. Certainly Ben is as well. We want to have a good discussion about this. We're really concerned about the sustainability of public health, and it's not working. I'm really concerned about the result of the triennial, because those findings are not going to be good.
Let me ask another question. If you were to, and end up the county taking this back, what about the offices and that you currently hold, the space that you currently have?
You mean where we are?
Yes.
Those are all CCH-owned buildings except for the Rush Center where we lease out that space. If you're asking, would that be an option for the county to lease? We could certainly talk about that. I'm interested in seeing public health go forward the right way, under the right circumstances, and we're willing to help however we can to make that happen.
$1 a year, is that the lease terms?
You must have been talking to somebody else, Commissioner Cole.
Start low.
Ken, do you know if these are programs that we can partner with another county on and have like a Coos Curry program for some of these?
There are some provisions that talk about the creating of a public health district, and in those provisions, it's one or two counties may join together, or 2 or more counties, may join together to create its own public health district. And then they could do the public health programs through that. Is Coos County having the same issues as we are? Good question for Ben. He sits in all the meetings. We certainly know that there are other public health programs around the state that are really not doing well. Everybody's struggling.
Is that mainly because, I'm sorry.
Right, go ahead.
Is that mainly because of the new restrictions they're placing upon them, or?
So one of the things I haven't talked about is right here, the public health modernization. The state has been moving away from a client service-based process to a population-based process. And in that process, there's a lot of changes that a lot of public health divisions are not happy about. It's creating the bulk of all these changes.
Commissioner Boyce?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We're a little bit aware of the other counties, and we knew this was coming, and to some extent anyway, but the way, as you outlined there, it changes so fast, unfortunately. And of course, we have a short session coming up in the 2020 legislature. So if anything, we should almost, not to be pessimistic, but we should almost anticipate more of the same or possibly worse. What I want to ask, if you have some of the other counties that, as you said early on in your presentation, they've given it back to the state out of just, I assume, the same kinds of frustration that you and your people have had to deal with on this, and your board.
That would be an option for Curry County, too, to just say, you know what, we're going to give it back to the state. State requires a 180-day notice if you're going to give it back to the state, but you can also tell the state, well, we're not going to give you a 180-day notice, and we're going to give it back to you, and you guys can figure it out. Well, when Wallowa County did that, it took about 3 months, and it ended back at Wallowa County. Nobody knows what backroom deals were had at that time to make that happen, but if Wallowa County commissioners felt like they needed to surrender the program, I think they probably had a really good reason for that.
Mr. Chair, I'm not recommending that, by the way, but I would, if the board would like, I can contact Coos County and see what their program is. I have no idea, and I've never taken the time to research that, but I could report back to the board, or maybe you have another thought or option.
Well, I was wondering if you'd like to contact Wallowa County Commissioner as well and find out
That would be Todd Nash.
how that ended up back in their county.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah,
See the
okay.
process and what the state offered to do that, because I'm sure the state doesn't want this on their plate either.
And the state rep there is Craig Barretto, so.
Better you than me. Commissioner Gold?
I have a question about the new restrictions that are placed, and also a question about the funding. Does the state give funding for some of these programs presently?
Yes, $437,000 is what we received last year.
Okay, so second question, they put more restrictions. Have they funded for all of the new programs and so forth they're requiring?
There are new funding streams coming out. So on the reproductive health, community participation and insurance of access, that's a new program that's being funded. On the public health modernization, they're actually funding that now. I think Curry County's cut is $78,000 over a 2-year period. So, roughly $39,000 a year.
So is that, you have to have grants for each one of these things, apply for those grants? And
It comes into your guys' contract that you already get from OHA that you guys sign, and it lists out what those programs are and how those programs are funded and what amount they're funded for. And anytime there's a change, they just show the ones that's, it's either being added to or deleted, or reduced, excuse me.
So basically, you're getting 437 right now, and then there's an additional 180 in environmental health that we could tap into. So that's 617.
You guys are eligible for OHA match where we are not. And although they didn't begin the matching program yet, that's probably coming out the door pretty soon.
Okay.
And if you drove the EH and started getting the VRBO, you're going to take it from collecting about $210,000 a year in licensing fees to about $310 to $340. I've already done the math on that, the homework, and that's, that's doing a good service. We're making sure that everybody who comes into any type of a vacation rental that's not within a municipality is licensed and inspected to make sure that it's a safe, habitable place for the public.
Okay. That's all I have. Anyone else?
just one last question. If the county were to take this over, do you think we could make it financially viable for the county so we're not taking big losses? I mean, you're more familiar with all of this than we
So
are.
I've worked at the county before, and I've worked in the private sector, obviously. I would say that if I were taking this over in the county, I could make this work a lot better than I can make it work in the private sector because I have access to money I don't have access to today. I can also do a little bit more with these programs than a subcontractor can do. If I don't have to hire a nurse and I don't have to hire a nurse practitioner, I'm going to save a ton of money by subcontracting those services out because they don't cost me anything. If we have a client come in for a reproductive health service and they go to a clinic and they get that service, the reimbursement's going to come down from the state. The county's not paying a dime. Your most expensive people are your RNs and your family nurse practitioners, and we pay through the teeth for those. So I'm suggesting, yes, I think there is a way for you guys to get pretty darn close to break even.
Okay.
Break even.
Well, I'm not looking for a profit. I just don't want to have a huge loss.
And I saw Director Schmelzer with her hand up. I've seen some statistics that it's a lot of counties actually subsidize their public health out of the general fund. But again,
I didn't want to hear
solely
that.
that's where we're-
well,
Well, this county
it's,
basically has
yeah.
been doing that for years.
yeah, no, but that's the reality, and that was one of our earlier discussions.
In 2012, the county contributed $180,000 to public health.
But other counties do that too, a lot of other counties.
Right, but I wanted to say one more thing.
Yeah.
They had 4 nurses. The nurses were doing communicable diseases, and the nurses were doing all these other programs that staff can do. You don't need to hire a nurse to do a communicable disease program. We don't have that anymore. That's how we were able to cut costs. We recognize those grants are coming down, so you take the appropriate action to reduce your overhead and your cost, and you get the right people in there to provide those services.
Director Schmelzer?
I was just going to say, you know, if we have to take some of these back, I think we need to look beyond the public health concern right here and look at DEQ services, perhaps. By that, I mean, you know, people need to get permits for septic systems when they build, and they're going through DEQ on that. It may be time for us to look at, do we start doing those DEQ services in-house and partnering with this to help pay for some of the staff people? I only bring that up because I had a department once where we did our own environmental health and our safe drinking water program. We had sanitarians in there. It was part of our building program, and it was all part of a planning department, basically. So, I mean, I think there are some ways to incorporate some of those duties into other departments. Vital statistics, I'm thinking maybe perhaps the clerk's office could help with. I'm not sure. We'd have to look at the statutes on all those. But, I mean, if we have to take it back, I think there's some creative ways that may impact other departments and perhaps bring in a little more revenue in some other areas.
Mr. Chair, I just asked for one last brief comment. I know I'm running over. I'm glad.
No, you're fine.
I didn't
Don't worry about that.
promise
Good.
Commissioner Gold that I keep.
There's no hurry here.
No, he did not promise, he just said that.
The last point I want to make is, yes, we spent considerable money, and we were definitely, you know, contributing to the cause, but let me share why. It wasn't just the cost of service and we didn't have enough money coming in. I want you to think about all the activities we did in the community. Those weren't free. About 25% of our losses are related to doing those activities and engaging with the public. You know, if you guys don't have to do that as a county, that's going to save you money right there. We spend a lot of money engaging with the public because we bring in food vendors, we do activities, we pay our staff, we buy Christmas gifts for the kids. All that stuff adds up.
Commissioner, would you like to look at doing the first part of that, and I'll contact Willoma County, or would you like to do both ends of that, or?
Honestly, whatever is your pleasure. I
I'd
can
like
do
to,
one
if
or
you don't
both.
mind, I'd like to contact Willoma County and talk to them, and then contact the state and say, you know what, I think we're about to end up with this back, and we don't want it, and see what they offer. At least start that conversation, because I think this is something that we
You're a
need to
good
expedite.
negotiator, I think you are.
I don't know if I'm a good negotiator, but I'll give it a swing.
I do have a couple more questions. Yeah,
Sure.
just point me in the right direction, and certainly I would contact Coos County.
If you contact Coos, I'll contact Willoma, and then I'll also contact Willama.
Did you say joint county cooperative, or what was the term you used?
2 or more counties may
Okay.
join together and create a public health district.
District, that's what you said. Thank you. I'm going to make a note of that. You know, I don't know which hat I've got on right now, the CCH board or the commission board, but when you said
that's how you
public
say it.
public general health consulting, I'm going to ask the board to consider, the CCH board to consider maybe more than just the next quarter, which I think you said was in January 31st, because it might be a resource that could be very valuable to us, and not looking for a service free, but that could be very invaluable to this board if, in fact, we have to go that route. We'll know more, as you said, when we report back to the board and when you come back at the end of, I think you said the end of October for the next
No,
workshop?
probably in a couple of weeks, because
Okay.
we're time sensitive at this stage. And
No, that makes sense.
you know, just sort of one last reminder, which is public health is what we're talking about today. You got to do the comparison to behavioral health. There's been one change in 6 years. You don't hear us up here complaining about that. We're concerned about these constant, never-ending changes from public health.
Commissioner Gold?
Just one last comment. Would you be willing to maybe work with Ms. Schmelzer as far as knowing which positions to consolidate and what they do and how we could get funding for it? And
We are fairly well consolidated now.
Are you?
We've spent years figuring out what the right methodology is, and we're down to the basic core services. of
Okay, so that was
people.
8 employees?
Yes. And we can actually give you what their cost is, but, just because they're getting paid, I'll just use an example, $15 an hour now, it doesn't mean you have to pay them $15. I mean, they're going from one organization to the next. What's the difference between the private sector and government? Private sector, higher wage, lower benefit. It's the opposite direction in government, higher benefit, lower wage.
So I'm willing to sit down with, I'm assuming Ben and Ken, or at least Ben, and kind of look at how we can absorb some of these and how we may be able to address staffing issues, space issues, things of that nature. If you want to work with the counties, research that end, I'll start with this list and maybe sit down with you late next week and start working on that.
Okay.
I'd even
Like
be
I said,
willing to
I'm at
sit
your
on that
disposal.
as well. I mean, well, if you want
Sure,
me
if
to.
we have,
you guys want me to.
appoint me a commissioner that can sit in on those conversations. Which
You want a
one?
board member from CHH or the opposite?
I think we just meet with staff, and I'll bring our CFO, so we have all our financial
Okay.
information. We have nothing to hide. We're completely transparent.
Do you mind if you had a choice, Commissioner?
I want to work with anybody who wants to help resolve this problem, so I
Okay.
don't care who it is.
Let's talk with Director Schmelzer and see
Okay.
what might be the best.
Not a
way
problem.
to do it.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
JJ, I'm going to give you back the mouse, or should I put it up here?
The famous mouse. Thank you, Mr. Duque.
All right, next we're going to hear from Harbor Sanitary District Code Enforcement, Mr. Melzer.
Yes, so the Harbor Sanitary District just wanted to meet with us and talk about code enforcement again. We did have a workshop with them maybe about 2 months ago. We just have some more issues and more board members that could attend today, so we just want to take that a step further and hear what some of their concerns were and see if we can help.
Very good. My name's Anthony Burkett. I'm board chair of Harbor Sanitary District, or HSD, to solve that. I'm representing the complete board and staff of Harbor Sanitary Department. We have 2 problem properties. This has been going on for a couple of years. The 2 properties are owned by the same person. And with the advice of our legal counsel, we have been moving forward on this with the only path we have, which is now coming to a point of the end. And I'm basically here to see if we get some help from the county on this, because we're going to need some help to resolve a problem that has just been let go. And that's the main reason we're here. To not only make you aware of the problem, but to let you know we need some help. Because we can only follow the guideline of our attorney.
So the county can help in a couple different ways that I can see, and council can join in on this if he wants. One is from the land use perspective. We can also work on things like if there's violations of our building safety code, of the state's building safety codes.
Correct.
We have the authority to request that the power be cut to the property. I'm not sure what all has been done so far. Mr. Fortman, are you familiar with the violation he's speaking of? Could you maybe just talk a little bit about what we have done so we can see what we can do? What's left to do, or how we can help?
This property involves 2 allegedly constructed units post-property without permits. Came to code enforcement's attention last October. Since then, we've tried working with the property owner to try to resolve it. We're currently at, originally, the original inspection of the property that I made found numerous safety and building code violations that were apparent to me. I referred them to our building department to make the formal professional inspection of the property. I did issue initially a warning to the property owner that he needed to comply with the permit process and get the proper permits for building these units. The building department at that time declined to do an inspection of the property, saying that they did not have the legal authority to go into it. We've since changed building officials since then. Recently, with the help of one of the commissioners, actually met with the property owner. A written abatement order was issued to him at that point. That abatement order was to clean up some of the trash and safety hazards on the property, to obtain the proper permits, to obtain a safety inspection by the building department to confirm whether or not the 2 units were habitable. He was given amount of time and referred back to these agencies. Since then, planning has met with the property owner. The planning came out with an agreement with the property owner where they agreed to issue a conditional permit pending an inspection by the building department to see whether or not it is even safe for anybody to be in these properties. The property owner has recently, then came into the building department to comply with that. He only submitted a letter, didn't fill out the application, which I just found out last night. The building department in the last 2 weeks has contacted him several times to complete the process so they can get the building inspector in there. And the gentleman each time has promised to be back within a day or two of their phone calls. As far as code enforcement inspecting the property, during this process, the property owner decided that he did not want to cooperate at that point with inspection of the units. So we honored his request. As a safety concern to protect the property owner, the tenants, and the county, we required him to obtain a commercial construction person to make an inspection, and put it on their letterhead that this was safe pending we could complete all this other process. The property owner complied with that process, so it was allowed to go on. Right now, from what I understand from Harbor Sanitation, they're at a deadline to shut down the sewage attachments to the property. From what my understanding and from what I've seen of the way the sewage system was constructed, they can't shut down the 2 unpermitted properties without shutting down the 2 primary properties. The tenants, we trying to go around and talk to the tenants for permission to inspect the property. Both tenants, about a month ago when this was last active, declined access to the apartment, to the units at the advice of the property owner. So this process was allowed to run, and we're now waiting for the property owner to make the inspection so that they can determine whether the permits will be issued, so that to avoid this whole shutdown by Harbor Sanitation's board on September 16th.
Mr. Fortman, has it gone to court yet? Has this gone as far as legal action where we have a judge?
We have tried to work with all parties. We've issued abatement orders. No citations were issued because the party agreed to do these steps to obtain the proper permits, have the inspections, do all that. And, it was pushed out for another 30 days. That time is now running out in a week. And at that time, the option will be to cite them for noncompliance with the permit process, or to seek a court injunction, go through the civil process.
Commissioner Boyce?
Well, I would probably keep the property owner's name quiet in this case. I'm not sure what the legal aspect is, but I mean, all we had was a one-page document, so I had no idea this was going to be on the person that we're referencing here. That's probably not your thing, but I don't understand that, okay? I think, first of all, I appreciate your work in this. I think you've been cordial. Is my mic? Yeah. You tried to help solve this problem. And you mentioned the contractor's letter. He did follow through with that. I think initially when I talked to you on this, and I'm in a bind here somewhat, Mr. Chair, because I know this person, but, I know everybody in the county pretty much. And so he has 8 kids, too. He's putting through college, and that's no green light to be disrespectful of the regulations. But I do have a sensitivity to what he's dealing with. I think you did originally too. And so I think, if I recall, you initially reported back to me that he was very cooperative. He got rid of some propane tanks, maybe dealt with the hot water. I don't remember what you told me, but I think, correct me if I'm wrong, not to put you on the spot either, but you felt like he made some pretty good movements towards respecting the requirements you had so that he could go to the next level.
Well, absolutely, that is correct.
Okay,
The latest piece of information was, became aware yesterday that
okay, fair
the
enough.
building permits process hadn't been completed. It was the first time I had heard that.
And he's had those for a couple months, hasn't he? Yeah. And he also told me that he was going to come in and get that done with the Curry County Planning Department. I have no idea what the holdup is. I'd have to be honest and say I'm a little disappointed. It's put you in a tough spot, maybe me. Certainly the folks that volunteer and serve on that board. I've also, Mr. Chair, been sensitive to the people that are renting those apartments, with the housing issue. They showed up at a meeting and they said, hey, we're happy here. We like what we're doing. And when you compare it to a lot of the other areas where people are living, it seems hard for me to understand why the county or harbor or commissioners or code enforcement would make that the number one priority or a top priority that we're actually having this meeting today. I'm not trying to, compared to some of the other issues that you are dealing with and have you greatly concerned and all of us concerned. So I'm trying to understand why we're here today. If there's a way that we can benefit this movement forward and talk this individual or assist you and Harbor Sanitary, yeah, I think we're responsible to do that. And I've tried to figure out a way if I can possibly help on that. And I know you certainly have.
Well, for the record, this meeting has not been called at my request.
No, okay, no.
I'm just here to answer the questions on this thing. The effort is to try to work with them, but as I'm now understanding is potentially we have a property that may be uninhabitable in 12 days.
I have a question, because I understand if this is the same property, I'm thinking it is. Did we ever establish ownership of the property?
Yes, the ownership still remains in a family trust back east, but we did finally, and it took several months to get them to acknowledge Mr. Weiss's
It's okay.
the gentleman's participation in it, and to get us documentation that he had the lawful right to act as far as making construction to that property.
Okay, so he does have full authorization and access to do that, okay.
I have a question, some questions. So this is one property, correct?
Two properties,
Two properties, okay, and there's 2 homes and 2 accessory units.
correct,
So there's 4 units on 2 properties.
correct.
So that right there violates state code, because of course you can only have 1 home per property unless you go through certain processes. And then these photos that were handed out to us, these are almost 2 years old. And I know they're not yours, they were handed to us by Harbor Sanitary. Has this, apparently this, somebody was aware of this violation for 2 years? Is that correct?
Well, I can't speak for before I got here, but when I saw those photos in September, October of 18, I did make an inspection, and at that point, there was a different set of tenants in those properties, and they allowed me in there. And at that point, I was able to confirm that those violations that were depicted were still current. However, when I went back, finally got the property owner to come in and talk to me at the property, his assertion was that his first assertion was he didn't make any of these changes to the property. And then, after discussion, he admitted that, yes, he had made the changes, but he has made subsequent changes, bringing them into code compliance.
I want to make sure I understand. So he has made progress, or he's just saying he made progress?
He's maintaining that he has fixed those violations, but has declined us the inspection authority to go in there.
Oh,
So this is my issue, and I know that this has been around a while. I think since you and I first met and you were brought on, this has been around. It saddens me that this has gotten this far, because it should have been dealt with a long time ago. We were promised it would be dealt with a long time ago.
promised by who?
By the owner of the property. To my ears, he promised me he would deal with this.
Okay, but he just confirmed that some of those changes have been made, and,
But yet he's denying access to
okay,
the property for inspection.
okay, I'm not aware of that, but that's
Let me
not
make the
good
record
business.
clear. The changes inside of the units themselves that the pictures show, I confirmed in October that they were existing as those photos were. Months later into this process, the property owner maintained that he and his cousin had fixed those changes. Now, the only changes I could see from the exterior, not being given the right to go into those units, was that the above-ground sewage lines that were running down a sidewalk thing had been buried. So that's the only thing I can attest that had been fixed on the property.
So he did correct that.
Did correct that.
Okay.
My point being, though, if you fix something and you're trying to comply, why wouldn't you invite our code enforcement person in and say, look what I've got
Any
done?
inspection,
Pardon?
or any inspection.
Exactly, and I've got this much done, and I know I'm a little tight on funds this month. Can you give me another month on this? But look what I've gotten scratched off the list, and he's even denying that. I understand that the water hookup thing has been going on for a long time. I think he doesn't even have proper hookup for the sewage on the property.
That's my
So, I mean, again, I am sympathetic, but when you have someone that again has been in my office a couple times about this very thing and has made, I don't want to say promises, but strong words that he would correct this. And I'm not saying he hasn't corrected it, but why wouldn't you want to let an inspector in the property to scratch the things off the list that you have fixed and made them comply at least with enough for your satisfaction to let it move forward a little farther?
And just to give the context so that the record is straight, and I'm not trying to hide this, when I asked the property owner to inspect, he initially declined, saying, well, I have tenants in here. And I said, well, I can come back, arrange with your tenants, and I'll come back, pick a date. And at that point, and since that, at least one other time since then, he's declined to give access. And
I have a
that's why
question.
produced the letter.
Do you know, does most fire authority have a right to enter a property for a fire inspection if they deem the property a public hazard? Is that in Harbors? I know they're not an incorporated city, but through their fire department, is that in
That
there?
was originally brought to my understanding to Chief Brazil prior to mine. The last fire chief, Chief Larson, and I did talk about this, and he did not, he declined to get involved at this point.
'Cause I would say if I'm the landowner and I've got tenants in there renting my property and paying my mortgage and paying my bills, and I'm issued a possible, condemnation on the property because of things that aren't up to code on the property, that might inspire me a little bit more to get moving, to get it fixed. Again, I know this person. I don't want to say he's a good friend of mine, but I do know him somewhat, and I would hope I would have hoped that he would have done more.
And that is the hope that the enforcement division is to work with property owners to get things
Yeah.
repaired.
Ms.
Yeah,
Miller?
so I've encountered these issues like this many times in my past, and what they're life fire safety issues. And in my experience, when government is aware of a problem and we don't take action on it and something happens to those people, we are liable. So we know that they're potentially in an unsafe situation, and I think that it's our responsibility to make sure those violations are rectified to protect those people and to protect ourselves so we don't have a liability suit. In a situation such as this, I mean, we also have to look at, what impact does it have on the neighborhoods? Obviously, there's overcrowding there. There may be some safety issues, some sewage issues. I don't know because I don't know the details of it. But to protect the county and to protect these people, and we just did a housing declaration that not only looked at the numbers of housing people, but it looked at the quality of that housing, saying we're going to do our best to make sure people are in quality, safe housing. And unless we do something to stop this situation, this is just going to continue on with other properties. So in my experience, what I have done is have ordered the power to be shut off, because that tends to get, when they can't charge their cell phone, it tends to get you a little bit more attention. And that is something that the building official does have the authority to do, is go in there and require the power to be shut off, perhaps on the same day that the sewer is shut off. and it usually gets us some attention and gets us compliance right away. The other
Yes.
option is to issue the citations and go through court.
Commissioner Boyce?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I really have a concern that he wasn't invited here today. So we're talking around him. We're talking around this situation. Mr. Fortman, one more question. Thank you. Do you, in your heart, soul, and mind, feel like those tenants are in an unsafe environment? Because I've been to those places. And maybe I shouldn't put you on the spot, because I know there are some things that I saw that made me uncomfortable, but I didn't, I didn't characterize them, sir, as, a high-risk thing. And I want to, and maybe you can speak to this in a moment, but if we consider that a public health hazard, you see by these pictures 2 years ago, and he has made some improvements. I'm not at his defense here. He has made some improvements. He's hanging on by a thread. He needs to come up with, and the Harbor Sanitary District doesn't have a lot of wiggle room. He has to come up with $16,000 by the deadline. I don't know where he's going to get it. I wish I had it to loan it to him and a lot of other people. But if these two places, as they sit right now, are public health hazards, we're going to have to shut down and move, because if the county's liable, we're going to have to shut down and move out maybe 15 to 20% of the people in this county that are living in far worse conditions, which comes back to the housing issue that we are trying to remedy. I'm not saying give him, improperly or not comply with the law, but you see, I know what you deal with every day. I know what Harbor Sanitary people deal with every day. The RV parks and the mobile home parks that they're trying, and that's why I thought they were coming here today, was to get our help and to kind of team up, and I think maybe that will be generated with finding you additional staff, which we are, as a board, fully committed to. But we have so many of these places in North County, Harbor area, all over, and the pictures, if I may, sir, just refer back to those, how staggering that was when you gave us that report. I mean, we're going to shut this program down. If those people are really not in a safe deal, we've got to figure out a way to get him the money so that they can save face and do their job, and he can keep those people in the room. I don't have an answer, but there's got to be a
Commissioner
way.
Gold?
So.
Can I give him a chance to
Oh, I'm
speak to
sorry.
me, please?
I'm sorry.
On that?
Yeah, I'd like to answer.
I didn't know it
Thank
was a
you.
question, so.
Well, it wasn't. It was too long a one.
The question is, that I'm trying to answer here is, where, in my opinion, was there a safety issue right immediately to have me go the next step right in front? And my decision was based upon, there was the two units. One had a propane tank outside a window causing ventilation. The other one had the propane tank inside. The one outside that I saw, and I pointed it out to the property owner, he goes, I didn't know that was a violation. I go, you need to fix this. Same with the other one. I've already fixed the other one. And I'm looking him in the eye going, are you telling me the truth? Is these people safe in here? He goes, yes, they are. It's been fixed. Let me fix this one that you're identifying as a life safety issue right in front. And that's when I said, okay, you're not giving me access. You need to give me a licensed construction person until we can get the building person in here to protect you, the property owner, and protect the county and protect your tenants, which he did within a week.
Okay. Commissioner Gold?
How long has this been going on? When were they first notified, or when was the owner first notified that there were problems and that they needed to take care of it?
October 2018, from code enforcement,
From
the
code
current
enforcement.
code enforcement. But there was files and understandings, and I know Chief Brazil was involved in this thing as far back as 2017.
Commissioner Boyce?
He also, Mr. Chair, Mr. Wise, claims, and I think it's accurate, you may have a better idea, anybody here may have a better idea, that when he first took that over, that was a drug-infested, unbelievable situation. He spent a lot of time and money. I don't know how accurate that is, but if you talk to neighbors around there, I think they will validate that, yes, we are so glad to have him here. We are so glad to have his tenants. Whatever, that it is so far above and beyond what it was, which gets back to the blight in this county. I think he at least deserves a little bit of credit for that. We still have the issue, though. How's he going to come up with the $16,000? He offered to pay, as I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Beebe, he offered to pay 6,000 or 7,000 and then have you carry the rest of it at some point, and he would pay the other 12 in a year and a half or something like that. I don't remember. Is there some?
We've had
validity?
several promises from this individual. One was that he would disconnect those 2 units himself. He was given by our board 30 days to do so in order to maintain the 2 legal units. He then came to our next board meeting with a representative from the county, asking us to waive all of the fees. We are not in the position to waive SDC fees for one individual. We would be setting a precedence for the district. We would be required to do that for anybody wanting to hook to sewer. We have a contract with the city of Brookings that requires us to collect them for the city of Brookings also. He did not disconnect, as he stated he would. Our attorney was at that meeting, I believe. Our attorney gave him over 90 days to give him time to either pay his fees or give eviction notices to those tenants. He has not done anything with that. He is now out for disconnection on the 16th. Our problem is we will displace 4 families because we have to cut this off in the public right of way. The way these units were connected together, we cannot enter onto the private property and cut off the 2 illegal units. So we're here to ask the county to help us with the 2 illegal units before we have to displace 4 people or 4 families.
You said you were he came to a public meeting was the code enforcement came with him?
No, it was not.
That would be me.
Oh, you went to the meeting with him?
Went to the Harbor Sanitary, I don't remember the date, but yeah, I don't remember him saying, requesting. Did I request that those fees be waived? Because I'd like to have.
I've had 2 telephone conversations with you, one requesting that we finance his fees, at which time I told you
Only
we are
inquiring,
not.
not requesting.
We are not a bank.
Is there any way to work with him? I think he has $6,000, forgive me for interrupting, but I think he has $6,000 that he has been saving that could at least get a start. I'm not suggesting they should take that, and because I know you're trying to finance, you know, he did offer, I believe, give me 18 months to pay the other $12,000, because it's $8,000 per SDC, correct?
I believe it's 6,600 per.
I don't know
Because
how he
I classed him as a duplex, which technically he's really not, but I classed him as a duplex because these units were so small. That did reduce his fees quite a bit.
Okay, but what is the total? Because I keep hearing 17. I don't know if that's correct.
It's 6,600 per unit, around
13,200.
6,600, somewhere in that area.
So it is for 2, not
For
3?
2, for the
Okay.
2 units that he has.
13,200. Commissioner Gold?
Would it make sense for him to pay the fees for all 4 units if 2 of the units don't even have permits yet?
That's somewhat the dilemma here. He connected to the sewer without a permit from Harbor Sanitary District. He did not go through the permitting process with the county. There was sewer, I believe, in one of the units because it was a wash house. We found one of the units under construction. We originally found these in December of 2017. We were contacted by a tenant that was doing the electrical wiring for him, and the tenant had concerns about these units. My staff went out, the tenant let him in, let us photograph. The photographs that you see are of the 2 different units that we looked at, one under construction at the time, the other one with the propane tank inside the house. I called John Brazil and said, John, I need you to help me with this one because there are clearly safety violations here. John and I brought it to the May of 2018 Code Enforcement Task Force meeting. Nothing happened there. I believe Commissioner Boyce was at that meeting, and also I believe John Huddle was part of that meeting in May of 2018. So the district has been working with Mr. Weiss since December of 2017, and we have had no luck at all. Our concern right now is the 2 tenants that are in legal units, we do not want to have to displace. But the only way we can get the illegal units disconnected from the system is to disconnect all 4.
Counsel?
So the tenant who let you in to inspect is no longer there?
I don't believe so, no. I think he has moved out. At one point, one of the tenants was...
Do you know if that has anything to do with him reporting the violations to you?
I do not.
I mean, I only see a few roads to go down here. We either disconnect services, electric and sewer, and make the property uninhabitable, which would displace 4 families, which may force his hand to do what he's supposed to do. We find a way to cut the back 2 units from, as you said, from the front 2, and displace 2 families, or we find another way for him to get another extension. But this is something that's been going on since 2017. From what I understand, he's made a lot of promises. He said he's fixed some things. You've seen he's fixed a couple of things, but he said he's fixed some things, but he won't allow anyone in to inspect to see if that they are. At a minimum, though, he's got 2 illegal taps in the sewer that you have to get your fees for and inspect to make sure they're properly installed, that we've been talking about for 2 years. So,
And the lines in the one were originally, he folded up the skirting on the manufactured home, ran the lines from the manufactured home, drilled a hole in the back of the building and ran the line through the back of the building. The sewer lines were laying on top of the ground. I believe that is one of the things that he did correct. I think he's buried those lines at this point.
one of my biggest concerns right now is we are getting ready to head into fall and winter, and propane tanks and the carbon gases and everything else that those produce, and the fire hazard of that is a concern as well. So, I mean, I can't see us moving anything forward other than a disconnection without at least going in and inspecting those buildings and make sure that they're at least safety compliant for those families that are living there. And Harbor Water District has their own authority to turn the water, or, the sewage and all that off. We have no authority over that. That's Harbor Water
But they
District.
might even be bound by
But I mean, we need to, at a minimum, be able to have our code enforcement inspector go in and validate that this work has been done, because it's not only a health hazard, it's a safety hazard, not only for those families, but for the surrounding families. Commissioner Gold, I think you had your hand up first.
Do we have the authority to turn off the electricity
Yes.
if they don't have planning permits?
Building safety permits.
Building safety permits?
The building inspector, the building official, has the authority to request the power be shut off. So he would ask CCH to shut it off.
And that would be on the 2 units that do not have
Well, and that would
permits.
be one of my questions that I would have is it wired similar to the sewer, where to shut the 2 off, you have to shut the 4 off? Or is the wiring separate so they
2
can?
meters, 1 meter, 4 meters, how many meters? is
Yeah,
there?
because I mean, if it's possible to just shut it off on the 2 that are in violation, that would be easiest, because if you shut the power off,
But see, we don't know how they're,
we don't know, because we haven't been in there, we don't know
Yeah.
how they're wired.
Commissioner Boyce?
Well, thank you again. I would be adamantly opposed that we even talk about cutting the power off as a county board, if I understand correctly. I hope there's a way out. Here's what I'm going to propose to the board, and how we might, first of all, I want to be able to help Harbor Sanitary District down the road with some of the other issues I know keep you up at night, and your board members in the harbor area. And I think we can, and we've already talked about that a little bit, and I think there's a real obvious need there. If he allows inspections, number one. Number two, I'd encourage you to look at those places and see if you are really uncomfortable. When you talk about propane tanks, he's taking care of that, I believe. It's no different than 2 propane tanks being on the front tongue of a RV and their windows open. I mean, we all use common sense, or we hope to. Talk to the renters, the tenants, and if he pays $6,000, maybe you can give him 60 days or 90 days, or maybe as a collective group, maybe within 2 weeks he can come up with the other 7,000 or whatever. And the last thing is, he needs to go to the Creek Planning Department and follow through there. So if you do those four things, maybe there's a way out here. I don't know. I'm not taking sides, but I know it's been going on a long time. That's not the issue. The issue is how can we, I don't think we can solve it without.
I'm sorry. My question though, as Commissioner, is he's been facing these same things month after month, after month, after month, and now years, that he's been asked to do these things. And I don't know, sometimes maybe you gotta force the hand. And again, I don't want to turn the power off either. I don't want to turn the sewer off. But if nothing gets your attention, then you have to up the ante until you get their attention. So I would hope that, when is when are you supposed to turn the sewer off?
September 16th.
So we got 2 weeks. So I don't know, maybe we look at him and say, okay, right now you've got 2 weeks to clean this up. You let inspectors come in to inspect the property, to make sure it's compliant, and have a clear plan and things that aren't compliant, that they're fixed within so many days. And you've got to pay the sewage, the tap fees for the sewage. And that needs to be done, and you've got, 2 weeks to do that. Council?
So we have a process in our code. First of all, we're in a workshop, so we can't get any
I know, we're not
board
making
action
decisions.
or board direction or anything
that,
like that
Council.
from the board. And our next meeting with this board is on the 18th. And we have a process in our code where our code enforcement, so you've heard the two options under our code enforcement. One is citations. Citations really are monetary fines, and some people just let the citations build up, just say they let anything else build up, and they don't pay them, and you're no better off. The other option is a civil remedy where we go to the court and ask for an order directing someone to do something or giving us the power to do it. We can't go to the court until we come to this board and the board directs us to go to court. And we give a notice to the individual to come to that hearing before we give that direction, so everyone gets their say. So for this board, the options are, we can have our code enforcement, Mr. Fortman, go and write a citation for a code violation. That is out of the purview of this board. That gets cited into court over there. Mr. Fortman's a witness. You really don't do anything there. The other option is on the 16th, staff can put this on for a hearing on a alleged violation where there will be an opportunity for everyone to talk about, thank you, the 18th or the 16th. That's the issue there, is it's going to be a little hard for you. Is Martha your lawyer, Rice? I'm sorry.
She is the city of Brookings lawyer.
Thank you.
And I
Do
went.
I know who your lawyer is?
Jim Coffey.
Jim Coffey.
Okay, I really don't know that I know him. But so in other words, you're saying you don't have permission to go on a private property to chop the lines between the legal and illegal uses. You don't have permission to do that, but if you presented a court with a request for an injunction to enter onto private property and do that, and saying, if we don't do this, court, you're going to make us, judge, you're going to make us cut off two non-harming families, a judge may be able to give you such an order. I haven't talked to your lawyer about it. Injunction is a fairness-based doctrine. It's not based on, everything's all clear, cut, and dry, and it's a fact-based situation. Maybe your lawyer has examined that possibility. Maybe you've even tried it, but it might be something you want to try before cutting off the two non-offending units.
That was our hopes of what
Okay.
Mr. Weiss was going to do. And he had agreed to do so,
Sure.
but then returned to the next meeting saying he was not going to do that. And that was the meeting that he attended with Commissioner Boyce and asked us to waive the fees entirely. And it's just been going on, and no, we've made no progress with him at all. He did receive the letter directly from our attorney letting him know that he had until the 16th, and like I said, he gave him well over the 90 days. At one point during this process, one of the units did become vacant. Instead of moving somebody from the back unit up to one of the front legal units, which I suggested to him, he said, well, I can't do that. And he turned around and rented it out again. And so he had an opportunity at that point in time to have legally vacated one of those back units. and not been concerned about his eviction time of the tenant, and at least given himself some time to get the other units straightened out.
Well, I'm trying to figure out why you're here in front of the Curry County Board of Commissioners again.
We're here asking for help because the original complaints were filed in December of 2017
Complaints with who?
with the county. I have copies of those if you would like
Okay.
them.
All right, thank you.
And then again in October
Okay.
of 2018.
All right.
And so Harbor Sanitary doesn't like to be in this position of having to go out and displace 4 families.
So-
And we're asking
Yeah.
for help from the county to do something here where we don't have to do this.
Okay. Our next opportunity for action would be the 18th, after your 16th deadline.
Commissioner Boyce?
No, I'm just going to say, I have followed this a little bit. They have give every extension. It has been 2 or 3 years. It is a sad deal, but I got to give you high marks for the whole board for that. That's well documented, and I think just as a commissioner, as a private citizen, much appreciated. I just needed to communicate that. That's all I have for now, than what I've already communicated as a possible recommendation for solution.
Ms. Schmelzer?
I'm going to put my community development hat on. As community development director, I think that I direct staff to work with Coos Curry Electric to have the power shut off until we can get compliance. And then we'll bring it back to the board on the 18th for further discussion. So if we have the power shut off on the 16th and we meet on the 18th, hopefully we can have some further direction on that. We don't need board approval to shut the power off.
Can I say so?
Yes, sir.
We've worked, I'm Gary Hart, I'm on the board. We've worked with this man and worked with him and given them extensions and given them extensions. He wanted to get a loan from us. We told him we can't loan money. If we loan money, we have to loan it to everybody, and we set a precedence. The majority of this money that he owes, we are under contract to pay to the city of Brookings. So our hands are tied. We have got to try and go by our ordinances and our resolutions. We swore that as board members. So what we're just trying to do and trying to get some help to get this off our plate, because it's taking up a lot of our board time. So any help you can give us, we'd appreciate it.
I would say that under what Ms. Schmelzer just said, if she were to direct staff that way, that still gives him 2 weeks to find answers to this, to comply with the sanitary district and the county code enforcement officer.
And also getting the permits, building permits.
I think at some point he has to have his hand forced to complete what he promised he would complete.
Yeah, but
And
he
I
hasn't been able, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair.
I understand that he may have some challenges. I know him, again, personally, and I know that he has had some financial hardship and challenges, but there comes a point that you have to say, you know what, enough is enough, and we need to fix this or move on.
Can I offer, I am willing to work with Ms. Schmelzer on some timelines. If we need to extend a little bit more, I can discuss this with my attorney, and we're not talking lengthy. We've already given him ample time to pay the fees or come up with a solution. But if you need to bring this before the county commissioners again, and they don't meet till the 18th, I may be able to play with that just a little bit.
I'd much appreciate that. And two, remind me again the exact figure. I don't know where I got 17.
I don't have that with me, but I can call and let Julie know.
Very helpful.
She can get that to you.
So if the Harbor Sanitary folks, board and director are willing to do that, then let's see what happens on the 18th. Maybe we need to get it on the agenda. I've already expressed that I'm adamantly opposed to shutting off power. And not just because it's this group or families or tenants, but I don't want the county in that kind of a capacity. You say we don't need board approval. I think that's probably accurate, Director Schmelzer. But I think that would just be a very sad day for me.
He still has the obligation of the systems development charges, and that's why he's out for disconnect with us, for illegally connecting 2 more units to the system without permits from the district. I did make an agreement with Janelle Howard at the City of Brookings. We signed off on his permit, which we normally will not do, without collecting the fees first. I spoke with Becky Crockett, and we signed that off contingent upon the occupancy permit being issued. So those fees have to be paid before he can get an occupancy permit.
And that's
Sounds
what
like you've done everything you can do to
absolutely.
push this along.
One more thing that they did to try and make this work, Mr. Chair.
And so I don't know if, it may be more to his benefit just to disconnect those 2 units at this point until he has the money to pay those fees.
Are they also paying a monthly sewer fee?
They have some back sewer, I believe, that's still owed, but they are now paying the monthly sewer fees. They were not when they were initially
So
connected.
for a couple of years, free sewer?
Yes.
So if he vacated the 2 units,
Mhm.
the 2 illegal units, that would just kind of put everything on hold with Harbor Sand, is that correct? I mean, you'd still want your money, the past money, but he wouldn't have to pay SDCs for the 2 units because they would, in effect, not be units.
Correct.
These are
He
all
needs he needs a resolution one way or the other. He either needs to pay the fees or he needs to shut them down.
Got it.
All right. Anything else? Thank you.
Thank you.
And we will hear this, can we add this to the agenda for the 18th?
Yes.
And hopefully he's complied by the 18th, or the board will need to take further action on it. All right, next we have Justice Center discussion, Ms. Schmelzer.
I just wanted to have a discussion with the board. We had,
Death
last week we
services.
had the district attorney take Court and I on a tour, and he showed us the conditions that they're living with, that they operate out of, where, they're 3 floors apart, they're spread out through several offices, they have some storage issues, definitely they have, I think, what I would call some safety issues. So they wanted a tour of the Colvin building across the street. So we took them through there, and I think they were quite surprised to see how many people are actually in that Colvin building. There's quite a few offices operating out of there. So I had asked Court if he could reach out to the man that owns the property across from the Sheriff's Department, Mr. Garner. And Mr. Garner has indicated that he'd be willing to talk with us about possibly buying that property to expand some of our offices, such as a justice center, putting all of the judges, a courtroom, the DA over there, maybe even juvenile, I don't know. I did talk to him about the concern that we don't have the money to do that, and he did say that perhaps he'd be interested in building the building and then leasing it back to the county. I mean, so we were just kind of throwing out options and brainstorming. And before I even went any further with that, I just wanted to bring it to the board to say, is this something we want to explore? After hearing today Ken Duquesne's presentation, I'm a little more concerned about our space needs. We've outgrown where we are, and we have some issues, and we've got to do something. So I know we want to rebuild the courthouse. That would take a couple of years. Do we proceed with pursuing or listening to this property owner and what he has to offer us, or is this something you just don't think we should even discuss right now?
Commissioner Gold.
I think it would make a difference in, number one, how much it's going to cost us for the property. If he builds the building and we have to lease, how much is that going to cost? It kind of all depends on funds.
So would you be okay with me exploring that further?
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Commissioner Boyce.
Thank you. Yeah, today was even a little bit more of an eye-opener. I mean, I knew it was coming a little bit, but when we start talking about taking on a department with 8 additional employees, that's going to take a lot of detail, a lot of reorganization. I think I'm going to just ask the county departments and employees in general to understand that we're going to do everything we can to get additional space. I don't know, and you've talked about this, if this is the right direction. It would depend on the deal and how good it is for the county, how long-term. We may have to find a way to do it with the space we've got, and that may mean that people share desk or share office space and have matching desk or what have you. What I do want to emphasize is to see how scattered the district attorney's office is and how that almost shows a disrespect for the employees, at least with what we saw, and just the sheer amount of stories that they're required to have. It is not a good situation. And I could be more specific and give you detail. Director Schmelzer can do that by email or just directing conversation with the two of you. But I think the district attorney really needs our support. It may be a couple of years before we can actually get something really concrete done. But I want to, again, kind of prepare the county employees that nobody's above being moved or, we've got to take maximum advantage and efficiency on space. But yes, the board given authorization to follow through with this and look and get a plan going, I think is going to bring some good things long term. Just going to take a little bit to get there.
Okay, so let's get that on the presentation by him. You want to have him maybe come, or just talk to him first?
I'll talk to him a little more and see what,
Okay.
the details, and if it's even a possibility. Like I said, it was a conversation, so
Okay.
I'd want to explore further.
Just another possibility, I don't know how many offices are over with the district attorney, but some of the health people could probably go there, and I'm thinking Kieran's office is really big, maybe
Sure. I did.
someone there too.
I did request a copy of all the floor plans of all of our buildings, so I do have those. So I was going to look at them for current departments and see if we could look at, our space needs. And rather, I'm not a fan of just moving one department to make room for something. I'd rather we look at everything comprehensively.
That makes sense.
After a meeting or workshop today with CCH, I see even a greater need for it. So if the board's okay with it, I'm just going to pursue that. I'm going to keep working on that, and I'll bring it back to the board.
Maybe a two-pronged approach, look at what we could do, just keeping what we've got,
Sure.
and then what prices, is it Garvin or Harvey or?
Garner.
Garner, okay, close.
Yeah.
Anyway, what he would come up with.
Okay.
All right, does anyone have anything further, council? Anyone? Can I swing it? No?
No.
Meeting's adjourned.